Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our live stream cooking show. This is a Minneapolis Farmers Market live cooking demo, and it is in partnership with the Bonicelli Cooking Club, and I am Chef Laura Bonicelli of the Bonicelli Cooking Club. I am also the Minneapolis Farmers Market chef, and we have been and will be live streaming cooking segments every Wednesday and Thursday all season long. And tonight we are making, just in time for all of those beautiful tomatoes at the market, an heirloom tomato pizza. This is a really simple and strikingly colorful dish. Heirloom tomato pizza. Yes, there are tomatoes and there are heirloom tomatoes. And what are they and why are they so special? We know that some of them are kind of weirdly shaped and colorful, better tasting than regular tomatoes. The seeds are what makes an heirloom tomato an heirloom tomato. They are passed down from season to season. They're taken by the farmers from the tomato plants that are producing the best fruit. This process of saving the seeds allows the farmers to select for certain traits like juiciness or size or shape or color. And heirloom tomatoes, which are usually open-pollinated, that means that they're pollinated naturally. That's by birds and insects and wind or human hands. There is no weird genetic modification, which is common practice in most mass-produced tomatoes. Those are the ones that we find in the grocery store now, most of the time. Most store-bought tomatoes have been bred to look like perfect little round tomatoes. They're uniform, they're plump, they're red, they're round, they're easy to store in the produce section of the supermarket because they line up so perfectly, and they're tough enough to withstand shipping. So these tomatoes were created for consistency and durability, but not necessarily for flavor. So they're good for the people who sell the tomatoes and not so good for the people that buy them. They're hard, mealy, flavorless, and kind of a waste of money. So I love heirloom tomatoes for their idiosyncratic qualities, their colors, their textures, their sizes, flavors, and variety. They are beautiful and they are delicious. But all that said, just because a tomato says it's being sold with the word heirloom attached doesn't mean it's actually an heirloom. So you have to be aware of that in grocery stores, because just like the term natural, the term heirloom is not regulated by anybody. So plenty of farms, especially big ones, market their tomatoes, especially big ones, market their tomatoes as heirlooms. It's kind of a cover-up for what they actually are, which is genetically modified seeds. The farms are cashing in on the heirloom hype while selling you an inferior tomato. And the only way to make sure that you're getting a beautiful and delicious heirloom tomato is to buy them from someone you trust. And that's where farmers markets come in. There you can ask about the variety and how they're grown, and they will love to talk about it. And you can get a bright, colorful, juicy, and flavorful historical tomato, an heirloom tomato. Now, this pizza, the heirloom pizza we're about to make, to me, looks a lot like a stained glass window with all of the colors. Mark took a trip down to the farmer's market for me this morning to pick up some heirlooms, and here they are. Look at the incredible variety that he got. Let's get started though with our crust, and we are working with phyllo, which we just worked with last weekend in the club. We made spanakopita. I think that people don't use phyllo because they really just don't know how to manage it. Phyllo is sold usually frozen in sheets, and I did buy this frozen and thawed it. It's made with flour and water and a little olive oil, so it's almost fat-free, so a nice alternative for a low-fat, no-fat crust. I thawed this overnight in the refrigerator, which is definitely the best way to thaw it. Otherwise, 3 hours on your countertop before you can work with it. It dries out very easily, so here's what I do. I have a damp cloth here, and let's just open this package of phyllo. This comes 2 of these to a package. Let's just roll this out. Okay. And then just open it like this. And there are my sheets. Just keep rolling. There we go. And usually it's folded in half in some way. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that plastic in place because I will have leftover sheets, and I'm going to roll it right back up in the plastic when we're done. And then I've got a damp cloth here. Not too wet, but it is damp. You can use paper towels if you want to. And I'm just going to set that right over the top. And that's how I will work with this on top of that. If you wanted to place a piece of parchment paper between the damp cloth and the sheets, you can do that. I usually don't do that because I just make sure that my damp cloth is not too damp. So I'm spraying a baking sheet coated with parchment paper. See that there? And I'm spraying the parchment paper. And that's just to help make it easy for me to get the crust off once I'm done after it's baked. Okay, so we're going to take one sheet of parchment. And I've got over here 1/3 of a cup of olive oil and some breadcrumbs. That's probably about 1/4 cup. Oops, I think I have 2 sheets here. Let's see if I can pull this apart. Nope, that's one. Okay. Okay. So then, taking my olive oil, just a little pastry brush here, and I'm going to brush this nicely. So the thing with phyllo, oops, and let's cover this up. So you have to remember to cover it up with your damp cloth. And you do need to make sure that you have contact with this oil. The oil is important. If it doesn't have contact with the oil, it'll bake up and it'll look nice, but it'll taste kind of raw. So either butter or olive oil, some type of fat, is kind of essential to the process. If you're making baklava or spanakopita, you're doing exactly the same thing. Every sheet has oil or butter. And I like this recipe with olive oil because you get that kind of olive oily flavor. The butter would make it much more heavy, I think. It's perfect for a pizza. Okay. Then I'm going to take some of my breadcrumbs here and just sprinkle them over the top. What the breadcrumbs will do is they provide a little separation between the layers and a little extra crunch. So that's a nice thing. They just kind of keep the whole thing, the layers a little more separated. You can use, these are just fine breadcrumbs. You could use Italian season if you wanted to. I just am using plain. Okay, let's grab another sheet here. And sometimes they start to stick together. And if they do and you rip one, don't worry about it. There's absolutely no way. There one that just kind of ripped apart there. There's no way you will ever know that. So it's very forgiving. Okay, and then again, so that's 2, right? Mark, can you kind of help me keep count? I need 8 total.
That's 2.
Okay, thank you. You'll see if either one of us remembers to keep count. I'm usually at the end going, that looks like it's 8. As I said, very forgiving. Just all the way across there. Okay, and then my breadcrumbs. And if during this process you forget your breadcrumbs during one of the layers, that's fine. Don't worry about it. There's really not any real way to screw this up in putting it together. You just have to realize that you can just keep going. And I would say the only thing that can go wrong with this crust is overbaking it, forgetting it in the oven, something like that. This phyllo is behaving very nicely. Okay, so let's just write down like that. Okay, that's 3. And then cover this back up. We made a spanakopita. I think I referred to that last weekend in the cooking club. That was fun. Such a beautiful, delicious, healthful dish. Get spinach at the market, right? And you'll note I'm really carefully doing this to make sure everything does get some contact there. Okay, breadcrumbs. Okay, and let's do our fourth layer. So if you do get mixed up and you don't remember how many layers you have, I would probably guess on the shy side. So in other words, this is 4. But if I didn't remember what it was, I might say, oh, okay, I've done 3, because I'd rather have more than less. And remember to cover it up. And the great thing about it is if you can probably work through this and not have it dry out that much. But if you do keep it covered, you can refreeze it. All you have to do is wrap it up and toss it in your freezer. And just wrap it up well, and you've got another 3 months to use it. Just like puff pastry. And as long as you get it back in the freezer within a reasonable period of time, you're good to go. Okay. This is 5. Oops.
This is 5.
Except for the breadcrumbs. See what I mean? Okay. There we go. Five. Okay. And see, I'm getting a little height to this. It's starting to look more like a crust now.
And your towel.
Oh, my towel. What would I do without you? I'd have dried out phyllo. It's true, I would. I also would have no cameras, no lights.
No, no show.
No show. I'd just be watching TV now. Okay. Okay, and this is 6. Okay, cover up my phyllo. It seems like, we're putting on a whole bunch of olive oil, but, really, we're not going to use all of that, so it's less than one would think. Phyllo dough is something that I always have in my freezer because to me this is like if you pick up some tomatoes at the market and you want to just have a quick light dinner, this is a great way to do it. Just pull that phyllo out, thaw it out. If you have it on hand, you don't have to worry about it. There's no yeast involved. You don't have to raise it. You just take it out, thaw it, and put it together. Okay. So this is 7. And that's true, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. You have to kind of get in a rhythm so you remember what you're doing. In other words, remember to put the towel on and the breadcrumbs. Okay, we only have one more. This is the last layer for breadcrumbs. Then when we put the top layer on, no breadcrumbs. Okay, last layer.
You put breadcrumbs on?
No, I didn't put breadcrumbs on. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without you. Okay, these, I'm just gonna take these out of here because this is all I have left. Okay, now my last layer. Oops, now it's starting to stick a little bit. Just pull it away gently. Look, that's tore just a tiny bit. But like I said, you will never, ever know that. Okay. Pick that up again. We'll deal with you in just a second. Okay, final bit here. Now my oven is preheated to 375 degrees. And I'll show you what I like to do to just kind of make this a little more crust-like. And by the way, if you want to make a bigger one of these, you can basically do this in double sheets side by side. So in other words, you'd be laying this this way on the pan and then kind of scrunching up the edges like I'm going to do now. You could overlap it a little bit in the center. You're going to be cutting it anyway if you wanted to go double-sized. You'd have to increase your cream cheese filling, which we're about to make. And you'll see what I'm doing is I'm just pushing it in, kind of folding it up and pushing it in just to make a little bit of a crust here. It's not really necessary to hold the ingredients because they're not gonna run off the edges or anything like that. But I think it looks nice. So, okay, 375 degree oven. I would set a timer for 10 minutes, check it at 10 minutes, set it for another 5 minutes, check it, that would be a total of 15. Rotate the pan at 10 minutes so you're sure it's baking evenly. And this one I'm about to show you took 15 minutes, and I'll be right back with that. So here is this crust. But first, let me set this back here. We are going to make the cream cheese part of this, and I'll show you what I do with this. So again, I saved the plastic that it came in. I basically fold this over like that. Very similar to how it was when I opened it. And then I just roll this like that. And I got a Ziploc. I put it in the Ziploc. And get the air out of that and seal it and roll it. Then that goes in my freezer. I can use it within 3 months. Okay, now over here in my food processor, you can see that okay? Is that an all right place for that? I have 8 ounces of cream cheese. I did take this out about half an hour ago just to let it soften up a little bit. And then this is a third of a cup of homemade mayo. Of course, you can use a store-bought mayo. I prefer it would be a real mayo, like a Hellmann's kind of thing. So easy to make your own mayo, though. You should just make your own. There's a recipe for that on my blog. Okay, so then we just mix this up. To go pretty quickly. Always helps to soften that cream cheese a little bit because it does resist incorporating. Let's have a look and see how that's doing. Yeah, it's not bad. We'll give it one more little whir. Let me just set that there. Sorry for the noise. I don't know what that noise is. Okay. And that's all it takes. All right. So I'm going to use that right out of here. So I'll just leave that sitting there. Okay. Then tomatoes. Let's bring that crust over here. So this is the done crust, and as you can see, it kind of puffs up and collapses a little bit because of the breadcrumbs. That is totally fine. That's what it's supposed to look like. And this is about 15 minutes, as I said, and this is about how brown I want it. This is not going to be cooked anymore. It's not going back in the oven. Everything on top of this pizza is fresh. So you want to make sure that your crust looks exactly how you want it to look when it's done. Okay, so now we have to select our tomatoes, the part I've been waiting for. So what I've got is these kind of crazy looking heirlooms. For sure want to use this. I'm looking for a variety of color. And I'm not going to, of course, use all of these tomatoes. I'll use the different varieties to get the color I want. Then I'll throw them in a Ziploc bag, put them in my fridge, and I'll chop them up for a salad later. So let's go with these guys. And then I also have some cherry tomatoes here. These are all from Untied's Farms. Untied's Farms. One of my favorite vendors at the market. Their tomatoes are just glorious, and they have these multicolored cherry tomatoes that I love using as well too. Super flavorful. And I also have, just for fun, some ground cherries. And ground cherries, if you're not familiar with them, they're very sweet. They're sort of fruity, passion fruity tasting. What do you think? Do you agree with that? Yeah. They look like little tomatoes, right? So they're kind of a surprise twist because people are expecting that tomato flavor, and then they get this sudden sweet flavor. They come like this in their own little package, just like a tomatillo. They're actually related to tomatillos. And then you just have to get rid of the wrapper and pull that off, and then you can slice them open and use them. These are all washed and ready to go. Ground cherries are called ground cherries because they literally fall off the bush onto the ground, and that's how you know they're ripe. So when you harvest them off of your plant, you're picking them up off of the ground. Okay, slicing some tomatoes. Let's get some nice slices here. We'll do that first, and then we'll just assemble the whole thing. Okay, so look at that. It has this nice red streak. Isn't that gorgeous?
Are you using a serrated knife?
I am using a serrated knife. The best knife to cut tomatoes with is a serrated knife because you will never be struggling to get through the skin. Or a very sharp knife, of course. So let's do 2 of those. Let's see what this guy has going. So this is more of an orange. Just love all this color. And they smell so tomatoey fresh and beautiful. We'll do a couple. Let's do a couple of those. And I don't have it's not a huge pizza, so I don't really need that many tomatoes. But there we go. Sliding off the side there. I don't want to use the end pieces, but I for sure will save those for salads. And that's just a beautiful red. Going as thin as I can get by with here. And then I've got this kind of purpley one. Oops. Cut that end off. Oh, that's really pretty. That is almost like a maroon. It has a little bit of green in it. So in the picture, we found some green heirlooms. They didn't have any this time. That was really beautiful. Always nice to have that variety. And I think what I'll do is slice up a few of these guys. Cherry tomatoes. I think I'm just going to half those and just have them sit on top. Some of these are longer. I could do them in slices, but they're so small. These little guys, I cannot remember the name of them. I think they're Italian ice, so I did remember the name of them. I love these little cherry tomatoes. Oop, I think your camera clicked off. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me push these up here and bring the crust here. Okay. Get the rest of that cream cheese off here. There we go. Okay, that looks great. I'm just going to kind of, you have to work a little bit gingerly with this because of course this is totally flaky, which is why it is so great. So I like to just spread it, dollop it around so I don't have to do too much spreading. And this cream cheese mayo combination is actually what I use in sandwiches a lot. If you've ever done like little tea sandwiches, this is what I use for the base of that. Okay, then I'm just taking a little offset spatula, which is, these are really nice for doing this kind of work where you have to be careful. This is really the most difficult thing about making this is just making sure that you don't get crumbs all over the place. So you have to kind of work gingerly. Anyway, offset knives, like this knife is somewhat offset, really nice for just being able to get above and work with something at an angle. Okay. Just kind of go a little closer to the edges. It's like icing a crumbly cake. I can hear it crunching as I'm going crunching. So you know the sound it's going to be making when you're eating it for sure, right? Okay, I have a little bit more of that filling, or topping, I guess I should call it. So let me just make sure I'm getting all of it in here. So you can see if you wanted to make a bigger one and you doubled the phyllo, you definitely need to double the topping as well. And really, because I'm using, I could go with the same amount of tomatoes because I'm certainly not using all of the tomatoes for this. Okay, that looks good, right? Let's get this. Now we just put on our tomatoes. Okay, so I like to not overlap them. So I'm just looking for kind of a variety of color. I don't want it to look too bland. So I'm not going to line them all up. I'm going to just kind of work with the existing spaces. Pull you over a little bit. Okay, and let's get a couple of these cherry tomatoes going here. Where these guys I did not slice. I am going to slice these. So little tiny ground cherries. I used to put these ground cherries in salads, and I'd put them in pasta, and I would have people in the restaurant like send the server back to the kitchen saying, "What are those tomatoes?" It was so much fun. Well, they're not tomatoes. Let's put one of those over there. I think I want one more slice. I wanted to get this slice in here, so let's see if I can scooch some of these guys over. This is the slice that has a little bit of a red streak. I'm going to have to overlap them a little bit. Oops. Okay. All right. How does that look, Mark?
Good. There's some basil.
Yep, I'm going to put some basil. Okay, so I have fresh basil leaves here. You know what I'm going to do first, though, is let's put a little Maldon sea salt. So Maldon sea salt is a flaked sea salt. I love it. It's what we keep on our table. It's a sea salt, but it's not like a rock salt, so it pops when you bite into it. So it's a really nice way to finish off just about anything. And then some freshly ground black pepper. As much as, or as little of this as you want. I should say too, now let's do the basil. You could slide this off really easily. This will move. See, it'll come up really nicely. So you can slide it onto maybe a cutting board would be the best way. I had one over there. I think I'll do that after. But you can do that before you finish it or after, either way. just what you're comfortable with. Okay, so I'm going to go for the smaller basil leaves instead of tearing them. I've got some little ones here that I think will be really cute. There's a little bigger one. Let's see what else I have here. And this is just going to give it, you know, that wonderful peppery basil flavor when you bite into it. And it's pretty. Okay. All right, let me get my platter. I'm going to call that done. I'm not going to do the olive oil yet, so let me just get my cutting board here. So you could slide this, serve it right on the parchment if you wanted to, which I think is really nice, or you can slide the parchment out as well, which like that. There you go. So you can see how easily that comes off, and of course that little bit of cooking spray really helped with that. Okay, and then finally a little drizzle of olive oil before you serve it, and you are ready. Is that not beautiful? That was a like triple negative, wasn't it? Is that beautiful? There we go. Love it. Okay, questions?
Can you use puff pastry instead of phyllo dough?
Can you use puff pastry instead? Yeah, well, you know, certainly yes, certainly there are recipes out there that use puff pastry, similar kind of thing. The only thing I would say with that is that puff pastry is of course layers of butter, so it's really, really rich. It's really a different animal than phyllo dough, although oftentimes it's kind of used in the same manner. As a base for something like this, or for, you know, appetizers in some fashion. But I don't know if I would love this cream cheese mayo thing on puff pastry, just because, you know, you've got so much butter going on already. So I might opt for doing the heirlooms and doing a pesto base, or maybe just the heirlooms, or at least a lighter layer of this, because this is kind of a substantial layer. But you could absolutely do that and kind of make it up as you go. But really, I think that just tomatoes with a little pesto, olive oil, salt, and pepper on puff pastry would be delightful. So that's my answer to that.
Can you buy fresh phyllo?
Yes, you can buy fresh phyllo. I am not sure in the Minneapolis area if anybody does that, but I do know that there's certain, maybe Holy Land would do that. They would be my first phone call if I were looking for that. Or Bill's, right? Although they don't really make. I mean, Holy Land makes a lot of food there, and so that would be my first call. So yes, you can buy it fresh. And it would probably be from either a Greek type of bakery store type of thing, or it would be from something that's Mideastern. Those would be the two places I would look first. But right now, I don't know of anyone that's doing it locally.
And this can be refrozen.
The phyllo?
Yeah.
Yes, the phyllo can be refrozen. You just need to make sure it's tightly wrapped up and get it in. Well, as soon as we're done here, this will go right in the fridge and it'll be just fine. It might stick together a little bit more because it's been out in the open air for a little while, and I've exposed it to some moisture by covering it. But again, if it rips apart, if it sticks, you can see there's no way you would ever know that. So you can know that it's very forgiving. Oh, I was going to say one other thing. If you do a puff pastry type of base for it, the one thing, and I have an asparagus tart. It's in the cooking club. I don't believe it's up on the blog. It might be eventually someday. But what you need to do with that is take your sheet of puff pastry, roll it thin. So you need to roll it out and then score it around the edge to get the crust, and then the inside you poke with a fork to make sure that the whole thing doesn't puff up. Otherwise, you will end up with if you just bake a sheet of puff pastry, it'll just raise like crazy. So you need to punch holes in it with a fork so that it doesn't do that. And you'll probably end up still mashing it down somewhat because it will want, just by the nature of its millions of layers of butter, it's going to want to puff up. So that's one little tip if you do decide to switch this out. Thank you everybody for watching. I so appreciate it. Thank you Minneapolis Farmers Market, and please everybody go to the market. They are open every day. And if you go on Fridays are great because you can park inside of the market and just drive up to your favorite vendor. That's a big bonus for Fridays. But the weekends are really fun too. So Cooking Club recipes are on the blog, BonicelliCookingClub.com. Thank you everyone so much for watching. We will see you tomorrow night. Keep cooking. Ciao.